Welcome back to Cliff's Corner. I hope you've had a chance to watch all 27 episodes of Cliff's Forgotten Skills video. Now I want to introduce a new segment to Cliff's Corner, featuring extended footage and outtakes from the making of the video. Much of this footage was not included in the video because of time constraints. I hope you enjoy the outtakes and extended in-depth footage, and I hope it will make your camping experience more enjoyable.
In a wooded area like you see here, there's so much dead wood around that it's pretty easy to make a fire. You've got dry leaves, you've got all sorts of down, dry, dead wood, it's no problem. But if you go to places like the Boundary Waters Canoe Area, Quetico Superior Provincial Park, and virtually all your national parks and forests and things, in places where you are allowed to make fires, all the good wood has been picked over. I say that again. All the good wood has been picked over. You're not going to find stuff like this lying around. You're going to have to start out with a log, and you're going to have to cut the heart out of a dead, dry log. And friends, you're not going to do that with a Swiss Army knife. Let's begin with the knife.
2, 1.
You can choose a fixed blade knife or a folding knife. Your preference. I like them both. I use them both. But my preference tends to run to a fixed blade. Why? Because with a proper sheath, which I make myself, it's a quick, easy in, quick, easy out, and there's nothing to close or deal with. Secondly, because the blade is rigid, we can pound on the spine of the knife with a wood block. We're going to have to do this in order to split out kindling. And last but not least, which knife do you want to use to reach to the bottom of the peanut butter jar with? If you choose a folding knife, be sure that you get one with a lock, so that when you pound on the top, you'll see how we do this in a minute, when you pound on the top, the blade won't close and cut your fingers. This particular knife happens to have what's called a liner lock. It's just a piece of steel that runs right down the liner of the knife and intersects the blade so that it can't close on your hand. Very simple, rather inexpensive, and quite effective. Let's look at designs for knife blade.
3, 2, 1.
All right, let's look at length first. This particular knife has a 4 1/3 inch blade. This knife has a 4-inch blade. This knife has a 4-inch blade. But if you look at the three together, you will notice that if I compare 4-inch blade to 4-inch blade, with this style, I have much more working edge. Why? Because this blade starts up here. This little part over here is called a choil. I would encourage you not to buy a knife with a choil. I would encourage you to buy a knife where the blade starts right next to your finger. Why? Because this is the point of greatest leverage on the knife. When you cut something, you want to use this part of the blade. It's the point of greatest leverage. We're also going to be using the knife backwards, like this. This is the point of greatest leverage. If the blade doesn't start till up here somewhere, you're losing a lot of leverage. So the first point is you want a full-length blade. You want a blade that starts right next to the hilt. Secondly, there are two styles of blades. One is called a flat ground blade. That's flat ground. And that's flat ground. This is called a hollow ground blade. And a hollow ground blade is actually simpler to make than a flat ground blade because you just sort of put it on a wheel and the wheel spins around and cuts out the metal. The bad news is you wind up with a very thin edge and a very thick back. Try slicing a tomato with a typical flat ground blade and a hollow ground blade, and you'll notice that the flat ground blade, because the grind starts up here and goes to the edge, the flat ground blade has just much better edge geometry for slicing. Point 2, I encourage you to get a flat ground blade, a blade that's between 4 and 4.5 inches long. Finally, there's the matter of thickness. If you've ever tried to slice a tomato with an axe and then do it with a kitchen knife, and you understand the value of a thin blade. Think of what we use camp knives for. We're not skinning buffalo anymore, and we're not cutting our way through the sides of airplane doors. Instead, we're slicing tomatoes and cheese, reaching down in the peanut butter jar, spreading jam, slicing, maybe we're slicing some lunch meat for lunch. You want a thin blade. How thin? Thinner than 1/8 of an inch across the spine. In fact, my rule is a blade that is thicker than 1/8 of an inch across the spine is too thick. Anything over 1/8 of an inch is the kiss of death. Now, right off the bat, you're going to have trouble finding a good woods knife because most knives are too thick, they're hollow ground, and they have big choils on them, and they are more designed for cutting their way, through, like I said, through the side of airplane doors than they are cutting wood. Last but not least, there's the matter of steels. We don't have time to get into steels, but suffice it to say that inexpensive carbon steel is a whole lot better than inexpensive stainless steel. Most people will be able to get a much finer, higher, more precise edge on a piece of carbon steel than they will on stainless. Yes, there are some very high-grade custom stainless steels which are very good indeed, but those are high-grade custom stainless steels and they are quite pricey. When you go in the store to buy a factory knife at a reasonable price, you're going to get more for your working dollar in high-grade carbon than you will in high-grade in factory stainless. All right, that said, so much for the knife. You want to make a sheath for your knife because most of the ones that come with knives are too thin and they have keepers on them. It's hard to get the knife in and out.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Cliff's Corner, and if you have, give it a like. And please subscribe to my channel.